Hello and welcome to the 12th episode of the Ego Chall Podcast, a Call of Duty League podcast, apparently, as we were just talking about it. So we're going to be talking about Stage 3, Week 2 of the Call of Duty League and some really big roster changes. Today, Huke was traded or acquired, I guess. I don't know what the phrasing is for the CDL, but we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to preview the third and final week of Stage 3. So how you doing, Bink?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing pretty good. We have a pretty big show.
Oh, yeah.
10 matches in Week 2. Like I said, we're going to talk about the next 10 matches for Week 3. But I first want to start off with the news that Huke, who had been the franchise player for the Dallas Empire, and before that, Team Envy, he was, I guess, transferred was the terminology used by the Empire. He was transferred to the Los Angeles Thieves, which is huge. The Thieves have looked pretty good since they made their roster change and bench Slasher, but they made this move. They brought in Huke, who was previously benched for Fellow on the Empire's starting lineup. So I want to get your thoughts real quick about what do you think of Huke going to the Thieves?
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of talking about it in the last episode, just because that was when Fellow initially came in for him, and we were talking about the report that there were communication issues in the team, all that. But more importantly, after that, we were talking about whether we thought we were going to see Huke play again this year.
Yeah.
And, you were saying you didn't think Dallas was going to let him go. I was obviously saying that I wanted to see him, but I didn't know if any of the top teams were going to go out and go for it. I don't even remember who. I think I said Seattle just because they were potentially looking for a sub at the time.
I think we mentioned the Thieves in just passing because they were having roster issues at the time.
We were talking about the top teams, and I was I didn't really highly consider the Thieves at the time, but it makes sense now that it actually happened, and obviously. I'm happy for Huke because I think he's a really good player. I also think TJ is a good player, so it kind of sucks that he gets the short end of the stick. But I think the biggest comparison for me that I immediately thought of was the Rise Nation situation in World War II, where kind of ironically TJ was on that team, but Methods was coming. I don't remember if it was right after he won MVP. I feel like it was. But I could be wrong.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
Regardless, it was the Rise team was Looney, TJ, Methods, and Gunless, and they had won Atlanta. I believe it was CWL Atlanta. Methods wins MVP, and then Envy at the time, which Huke was on with Temp Classic and Slasher. Slasher becomes available, and Rise just goes out and makes the move to replace Methods with Slasher. And in my opinion, it's similar in the sense that, Methods is a good AR player, but at that time, Slasher is, he still is a world champion, but he's a world champion, at the peak of his career, and he was playing really well too. So they felt it was an upgrade, and they go out and they get that player, which they just feel like, will push them over the edge and make them even better. And in this case, it's kind of the same thing where TJ is a good submachine gun player, but Huke's out there. He's available. He's a world champion.
Yep.
And he's, one of those guys that he becomes available. You do everything you can to try to get him. So that's what they end up doing. It was pretty surprising, but at the end of the day, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this team performs, especially just because they're coming off this win over Optic over the weekend. And they're 3-1 right now at the top of Group B, so it's not like they were underperforming. This is clearly just a case of Huke became available, we're going to go out and get him. And if you think about it, now before this move, when Slasher gets benched and Kenny is staying in the roster, moving to main AR, it became clear that Kenny was the franchise player for LA Thieves.
Yeah.
Now, technically, it seems like they have Huke and Kenny as their franchise players, and they're going to build around them for as long as they can. Obviously, we're not going to know how they work as a duo until we see it in action, but I'm definitely excited to see what they're able to do.
So just a clear up what you were saying about Rise. So they won CW Atlanta in 2018, and like you said, Methods gets MVP. And then they stick with that roster going into the first stage of the Pro League. They finish top 2, and then they go to Birmingham, get 3rd, and then I think they had to stick with their roster for playoffs, and they get top 8, and then they dropped Methods for Slasher. But it was within a month of them winning an event and him getting an MVP that they picked up Slasher. So not like immediately afterwards, but pretty much very close.
That part of the comparison doesn't really matter. It's more the fact of like the player, just like the example of having a good player in a position, and then this someone they view as a better player becomes available, and regardless of who that other player is, they decide to replace him.
Yeah, so that's exactly what Nate Shot said. He put out a tweet earlier today. He said, Huke is a generational FPS talent. He will go down as a top 10 player all time when everything is said and done. I truly believe that. When a player like that becomes available, you do whatever it takes to sign him. So excited to have him here at LA Thieves. So like you were saying, it's just it wasn't that TJ was necessarily playing poorly and he was dragging the team down or anything. It was, this guy is one of the best players in the world. We were talking about in stage 1, even in stage 2 in the early parts, that he was the front runner for MVP, or at least one of the front runners for MVP. And even at the time he got benched, he looked like a very good player. They were obvious. The Empire are not a bad team. He was not making them a bottom 4 team. They had their struggles in stage 2, but overall they were a very good team. So Merck also said something similar. He said he's literally a player you build a franchise around, and I think that's pretty clear. If you have the resources to go out and get this player, so like Paris, that's a team that probably does not have the resources to go out and get Huke from the Empire, because I would imagine, I don't know the details of how this acquisition went down, but considering we haven't heard a player going back to the Empire in exchange for Huke, we're thinking that there's money involved, and a great deal of money, considering Huke was one of the most sought after free agents before the Call of Duty League began, and he's literally coming off of a world championship, so they had to have picked up his contract for that second year. So there had to have been money exchanged in this process.
Yeah. And just to finish off what you were talking about with Merck, I think it's interesting. Obviously, I'm not sure how much Merck knows about the situation, but you got to think he has some idea. He says, but if a player like that, referring to Huke, wants to play on your roster, you get it done.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting to me that, obviously anybody would want to go play for Atlanta FaZe, right? But who are you going to replace on that team? It'd be real tough.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, it seems like Huke wanted to go play with Kenny, Draza, and Venom, and especially saying he wants to play with Draza and Venom. If that's the case, those are 2 young guys right at the start of their careers. I think in the 0 to 100 videos, they were talking about how few times they've played on LAN. And it was less than a handful for each of them. So I know who kind of did that with XEO last year with Illy and Shotzi, but I think that was a little different. Regardless, I think that's an interesting tidbit, regardless of what Merck may or may not know. If Huke, had a choice of the teams he could go to, and he ends up going to this, it either speaks volume to the players that he wanted to surround himself, or the fact that he wanted to represent an org like LAT.
Yeah, and I'm very happy that this actually happened. Like you were saying, I did not believe that we would see Huke on a starting lineup for the rest of the 2021 season. It just did not seem probable for me, because why would Dallas give one of the best players in the league to a competitor? And, I was kind of hoping that New York was going to be the team to pick up Huke and reach out and acquire him, because, I just wanted to see that roster. Obviously, Clayster played with Huke last season on the Empire, so I thought there was I don't know of a good chance, but a better than nothing chance that would happen. But this is really interesting because the Thieves have experimented with several iterations of their roster already. And one thing I did want to bring up, though, is I want to see player trades happen because player trades are awesome in every professional sport, at least American sports. I don't really know about how soccer works in regard to that, but when the NBA or the MLB or the NFL trade deadline happens, everybody's looking and they're hoping, like, please let there be a big player dealt at the trade deadline because it's cool. It's cool to see these players change teams and see how they fit in. I would have loved to see Slasher go to the Empire for Huke instead of it being, well, we'll give you money for Huke, because Slasher's an AR player. I know that the Empire I'm speaking of, I know they say they believe in Fellow, but Slasher, he's one of the greatest AR players of all time, and they actually kind of need an AR player, like if Fellow doesn't work out. So I don't know what you think about that, but I just thought it would have been really interesting.
I just think, I hadn't really thought about it before, but like Empire need a sub now, right? Like every team has to have 5 players, so like unless they add Rambo as a sub, like they're gonna have to sign somebody.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it just like hit me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do. Yeah, I think probably the most probable is that Rambo gets assigned as a sub like Nubsy is with Seattle. We'll also talk about Seattle later in the show, but yeah, I don't really know what they're gonna do. I don't think they're sweating that too much. I don't even know if the CDL how hard they come down on teams that don't meet their roster requirements, to be honest. So we really haven't had to deal with that yet.
Yep.
Yeah, do you have any other thoughts, lasting thoughts on Huke to LAT and TJ being benched?
I kind of didn't answer your question, but I think Slasher would have been cool. We've never seen Slasher and Crim team, right? Like it's always been.
I'd love to see it
up against each other. And we've also, Slasher has that connection with the MV Org in the past. He won the world championship with them in 2016. So it would have been cool. I don't know how much sense it would have made. Like Slasher doesn't see like. I feel like even if he was part of the deal and he went to the Empire, he would have just been on the bench there too, right? So like it wasn't really going to be like a big change for him. It's not like well, I think he was in Texas for the LAT house.
Yeah,
he went back to Cali after so I don't think it would have mattered. It might have been cool just on paper, but I don't know if it would have resulted in anything. But yeah, I guess just lasting thoughts on this move is like we've said a little bit. Excited that Huke's back. It definitely happened faster than I was expecting. Regardless of whether we were both, thinking if it or when it would happen, didn't think it was going to happen mid-stage 3, let alone him going to the Thieves, who are in first place in Group B at 3-1. So it's definitely an interesting move, and he's a really good player, and obviously he's coming off winning the World Championship last year. But this just means like you make a move like this, he's gotta prove this was the right move, right? Because if he comes in now and LAT struggles, there's gonna be questions around him and what to do. He got dropped by Dallas, and then he goes to Thieves and they struggle. Like if that happens, it's just gonna bring up questions about Huke, and nobody really wants to see that. So I think I just hope that he comes out and he shows everybody again what he's capable of, and it's only a good thing for the future of the league if that's the case.
My final thoughts are that it could end up being like the Black Ops 4 season for Huke, where he goes to Splice and they don't do anything. They're kind of disappointing in that respect, because Temp was really good in Black Ops 4, and that roster on paper seemed to have everything that a great team would have, and Splice actually performed really well at the beginning of the season. So maybe that'll happen again. I hope not, because Huke has finally got over like this kind of reputation that he's a Silver Surfer and that he can't win or something. This was something that Assault, when we interviewed him at Champs 2018, he said like, this is just like a weight lifted off my shoulders to not have that reputation and be able to say I won the big one. So hopefully that doesn't happen with Huke and he's able to have success again because he seems like a great guy, definitely one of the most popular players and one of the most talented players in the Call of Duty. So, yeah. So let's move on. We have 10 matches to cover from the past week, excuse me. From week 2. What do you think?
You want to just talk about Desi now? We might as well, since...
Sure. So we'll just stick with roster changes. Decimate, who has played in Challengers for this season, previously played for the Los Angeles Guerrillas. He obviously played for Team Envy in Black Ops 4 as well. Really well-known player. He has joined the Seattle Surge and replaced Looney in the starting lineup. We've been talking for weeks. It feels like forever, essentially, when or if the Surge would make a roster change. They've evidently decided it's now. They're not performing too well in Stage 3. They're 0-3, so they have a chance to get 2 wins, in Group B, but it looks pretty likely that they're going to start in the loser bracket for the 3rd straight major. What do you think of Decimate heading to Seattle?
Yeah, I'm excited about this change too. I think, Desi's a really good player. Notably, he's had a good year in Challengers this year.
Yeah.
He's, statistically a good slaying sub, which, regardless of what people think about Looney, what they've been saying, that he hasn't put up the statistical numbers that I think Decimate's capable of. So this is like, a slaying change in the sense that Decimate should be able to pick up more kills. But he also might be able to help the Surge in search. And obviously it's been well documented this year that the Surge have really struggled in control. So S&D might not be like their biggest weakness or like worrying point, but he should be able to, he has that search and destroy background, where he should be able to help the Surge in that regard. I think it was interesting that Octane released a YouTube video today talking about his change, and he said that Seattle tried to get Vivid from the Los Angeles Guerrillas. That would have been interesting just from like a pacing standpoint. That's kind of what Octane talked about. He I don't want to, misquote him or anything, but to summarize, it seemed like he was saying that the pacing felt off on the team with Looney and Pristini as the sub duo, and that's what they're trying to correct with this change. So obviously, a guy like Vivid kind of would have filled that role in the pre-Simp United team, right? Where it was Abizi, Pristini on the Sogs, and they had JCap, Arcides, and Clays on the Maddox and ICR. Then, Abizi is going to be that guy who goes in first, so Pristini's behind him. That's just what it would have felt like if they got Vivid. It would have been Vivid would have been that first guy in, Pristini would be following him up, and it could have been a change that helped both of them. So I thought that was interesting, but I'm definitely excited to see Desi back in the league. I think it's he's just one of those guys who he deserves to be in the pro league. In my opinion, he's proved his ability multiple times. And it might have just been a side effect of the league cutting down or whatever. But he actually had a good tweet. I don't have it up right now, but he retweeted it recently where he was talking about challengers at the beginning of the year, and he tweeted a Game of Thrones gif with it. Yeah, he said so this was September 29th. He said, seen so many people complaining and disrespecting with why they don't have an opportunity and this and that, and honestly, I'm excited to be in the pit, referring to challengers. I'm a monster, and there's better opportunity to go straight to the top from the bottom. I'll gladly fight for that opportunity. So I think that's just a really good attitude to have, with a situation like this, right? There's nothing he could control about, COD switching back to 4v4 and cutting down roster sizes or, getting dropped from LG regardless. He put his head down, went straight in challengers, and he's been killing it in challengers this year. Now he's got a shot again. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do. Like we said, especially he's a really good search player. So I think there's a good opportunity for him there to show what he's capable of in search in particular and kind of help out the Surge team. I'm not sure if this is the change that necessarily pushes Seattle over the edge or makes them a championship caliber team. I don't know about that, but they definitely should be able to improve, at least, in the slaying department or statistically. But Looney's a good leader, and that's what he brings to a team. So it's going to be interesting to also see who steps up into that role without him.
Like you were saying, they're not like a horrible search team. Obviously,
Yeah.
they're on a 4-match losing streak, which is not great considering they could end up going winless in stage 3 group play. But they've lost 4 straight matches. They've in their past 2 matches, in the first week of stage 3, they were swept by Optic after losing a 5-game series to LA Thieves, and then this past week they get swept by New York. We'll obviously talk about it, but I mean they're not doing too hot. This is kind of a trend for Seattle. They had a really rough first season in the CDL, and the players and Nubsy were very vocal about how they couldn't really do anything in regards to their roster. They management essentially blocked them from making these moves and acquiring talent and improving their roster. So it's encouraging at least to see that now, they're not. I don't think they're in the last place. I think that's still London without really looking at the standings right now. But
Yeah.
they're close to last place. They needed to make a change. I didn't see a way for this 4-man team with Looney. I'm saying I didn't see a way for that team to be a top 8 team, get out of the bottom 4, and qualify for champs. So I just didn't see that. And one thing, they're horrible at control. I just looked at their breaking point. They're 3-13 this season. They've played raid 7 times. They've lost all 7 times. That's not great. Not great. I'm just saying.
It's been talked about on the broadcast, like every series for them.
Yeah.
I didn't know the exact record, but they just obviously they haven't been a top team. Like you said, they're in second to last place. They have 50 CDL points. London is the only team below them with 40. So they have many aspects of the team that they have to improve on. And so search is just one of them. And that's what I think Desi's going to help them with. He's going to help them in terms of slaying, and he should be able to help them in search because that's what he's best known for. But yeah, they have to improve just all around as a team. So it'll be interesting to see if Desi is the right fit and if he's able to, help them. I think that's the goal for them right now, is just to try to get top 8 so that they can top 8 in the overall standing so that they can secure a place for champs.
It's very possible that they do that. Right now they're in 11th place. They have 50 CDL points. They're 4-12 overall this season. But the 8th place team is my team, the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and they have 80 points. So that's 3 group play matches. They would tie them, or a good major placing. Getting top 6 or something, that really puts you in the conversation to get top 8. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. To get 7th, though, they would have to more than double their points. So 8th place looks very doable for their standards, and I think they can do it. I think any of the bottom 4 teams essentially can do it in the next 2 stages. So there's no reason to panic at the moment, but I agree with you. I think this is a good change. I'm glad Decimate's back in the league.
And one quick thing too, I just wanted to bring up. I think Looney tweeted a video or something like that where he said that he offered to help coach the Surge if the team actually wants him to help. He didn't know, but he offered. I think that's really cool. I think I don't know if this is the end of Looney's playing career. Obviously, he's had a pretty good career, and he's considered a really smart player and a good leader. So I think whenever his playing career eventually comes to an end, whether it's now or in the future, I think coaching would be something he would be really good at just based on the type of player he is. But I think that right now, regardless of him, whether this is the end or not, I don't think it is. I think he's going to want to try to compete again. Regardless, though, right now he's on the bench. He's not playing for another team. So I think him coaching is a great opportunity to show what he's able to do or to provide to a team in that regard.
Yeah. And just one quick note, World War II Rise Nation, we mentioned them just a little bit ago. 3 of the 4 now on the bench.
Yep.
So Gunless, he's holding on strong. He's making sure that they're represented.
I mean, you could even say 4 of the 5 because it's Slasher, Looney, TJ, and Methods.
Yeah. And that was, was a really good team, but it was a long time ago apparently. But I mean, World War II coming back, maybe, we don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe we'll count the trees on Arden Forest again. We'll see about that.
Oh boy.
So let's talk about these matches.
Yeah.
We got the Roster Mania stuff out of the way. We had 10 matches this past week, the second week of Stage 3. Really important for seeding heading in to the final week of matches. On Thursday, we had two games, London versus New York, and the LA Thieves. Obviously, they didn't have Huke at this time, versus the Atlanta FaZe. Both of these series went to Game 5s. London upset New York. Not like a huge upset, considering New York are still pretty new with this roster, and Atlanta pulled out a 3-2 win over the Thieves. So, any thoughts on these two matches?
Yeah, I mean, the London win over New York was just super surprising to me, right? Like, obviously, the week before this, we see Hydra make his CDL debut, his highly anticipated debut, and they're able to take down FaZe. So it's kind of like at that point, regardless of whether it's a honeymoon phase or whatever, they took down one of the top teams in the league. So coming into this past week, you're expecting New York to take care of business against London. London's in last place. They've made a plethora of roster changes throughout the years, including one recently with Zaptius coming in. So you're just, I was expecting New York to handedly take care of this series based off of what we had seen so far, and that's not the case. So it's definitely a big win for London. They took both searches in this series. They won Express 6-2, and they won Raid Search 6-4. Which I believe Clayster, I don't remember if it was on the flank or on broadcast, but I think he was saying like they hadn't played Raid Search before adding Hydra to the team, and like now they're like, it seems like they're like trying it out or something like that, because obviously they beat FaZe in that Game 5 round 11 on Raid Search, and I think that was like the first time they played it this year or something like that. So it could be a case of just experimenting, but regardless, it's still just a interesting match, and I definitely wasn't expecting London to walk away with that one.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add to the series. I was surprised, like you, because although New York is still kind of experimenting and figuring out what Hydra can do and how this roster will work with him, it's still surprising. London, we're still learning what they're going to do with Zaptius in this roster instead of Dylan. So it was very interesting. But I wanted to bring up the fact that apparently Hydra doesn't know most of the CDL pros' names, their actual first names, because Clayster tweeted a clip from the stream when they had a listen-in for New York, and he's calling out against, I believe it's Seattle. He's calling out against Seattle, which was their second match of this week, and he said Sam and Pristini are up. Sam and Preston are up, and obviously that's Octane and Pristini. And he said that he had to clarify because they realized that Hydra doesn't know their names, so he's super confused when they call out any of the pros' names, which I didn't even think about that kind of thing before he tweeted it, because, I mean, it's kind of like people memed, it's like a friendship league, everybody knows each other, everybody loves each other, but I was just I thought it was funny that this guy literally does not know who people are in the CDL, at least by their real names.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that should change at least once he gets his feet wet and is playing more. Definitely something interesting.
JP said he was going to make some flashcards for him to test him out. So we'll see. Second match, LAT and Atlanta. Atlanta wins 3-2. Any thoughts?
I think this one was closer than a lot of people expected too. Like, you know, FaZe was coming off that loss to New York, yeah. And I think before that, the Thieves, so they played London, but was that their only game of the week before? No, they beat the Surge and they beat London, and then they played Atlanta. So regardless, I guess some people might have expected the Thieves to win this. It still would have been an upset in my book, and I thought FaZe was going to take it, but it went the distance, and Atlanta actually closes it out in a search, right? So Atlanta won the first hard point. LA takes Express Search 6-1, which is pretty convincing. Then Atlanta takes the control. Los Angeles wins map 4 hard point to force game 5. And Atlanta clutches up in the search, which still a work in progress with Tupac, which is kind of weird to say, just thinking about how good FaZe is. But they're able to get the job done there. That could be a big win if you look at like a tiebreaker scenario, right? Because although LAT is technically 3-1 and at the top of their group, Optic, FaZe, and Subliners are all 2-1. So, and the Thieves play Subliners, so one of those teams will have 2 losses. But either way, that head-to-head could be important for tiebreaker scenarios going into the major.
For the search with FaZe, I think it might just be breaking habits or figuring out how Tupac is essentially going to coach them up in search, because we saw that they were incredible in search in stage 1. I think they lost one game in stage 1, and then they lost the first search of stage 2 against New York. But other than that, they've been one of the best search teams. I think it's just, and they're in a rut a little bit, and Tupac's coming in and he's trying to figure out how to coach them up here.
Yeah, I think it was at the end of that series. It was either I don't know if Atlanta played 2 series or not, but I think Arcides did like a post-series interview, where he was just talking about the addition of Tupac, and it's like Tupac's like telling them to do this, this, and this, and they're like, yeah, okay, we know we should do this, but like we can also do this, and Tupac's like, I don't care if you can do this, you do this, this, and this, and they're like, okay. So obviously I could have mangled that, but I think that was the gist of it, and I just thought it was kind of interesting. Yeah, it's not Rome wasn't built in a day, whatever the cliches you want to say. And it might be weird to say that the Empire, or well, not the Empire, the Atlanta FaZe is trying to improve their search, but that's what's going on right now. So obviously I'm a big search guy, so I'm all for seeing better search no matter what teams it's coming from, and I'm excited to see what Tupac's able to do to help FaZe potentially be even better than they already are.
On Friday, the Los Angeles Guerrillas and the Toronto Ultra played an incredibly long series for no reason, and the Paris Legion played the Minnesota Rocker. I mean, we don't really have to spend too much time on either of these series because Toronto ended up winning 3-0, although it took about 7 hours to conclude, and Minnesota won 3-1, despite the fact that we know Paris is winning champs. So they're just scaling, and they'll figure it out. But do you have any thoughts on either of these matches?
I just, I could be wrong here, but I believe that on our last episode of the podcast, somebody predicted that the Guerrillas would take down Toronto. Could be wrong, but I believe that's something that happened. I'm not sure if you want to shed any light on that, but it doesn't seem like it worked out that way.
Well, you see, they were going to come back. They were going to make a reverse sweep, but then Toronto just started hitting off LAG, and I mean, what are you going to do? Like, you can't do anything about that. So, yeah, I mean, I can make an excuse for LAG losing all the time because I'm going to have to, essentially. I mean, they were really close matches or close games in the first 2. So
yeah, the first 2 were super close,
and then they got ultra smoked in game 3. But they were also yeah, so they got the FaZe stay tuned treatment from last season.
You should have tweeted that.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't paying attention to Twitter, but yeah, I should have. So Paris, Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of just a series I think you expected Minnesota to win. Paris is still, I mean, I guess you can call it a honeymoon phase, but it's kind of they're struggling since bringing in temp. They're 1-3 in stage 3 right now, and they win the opening hardpoint. I believe that's the same thing. In their first match of the stage, they played Dallas and they won like Garrison hardpoint map 1, and they lost the next 3. Kind of same thing happens here where they win Map 1, it wasn't necessarily smoke. It was 250 to 169, but it's not a close game. It's kind of one in between. But then Minnesota goes on. They win Miami Search 6-2, Garrison Control 3-0, Apocalypse Hardpoint 250, 151. So it's like, after that first map, it might be something to do with the vetoes. I don't really know, but Minnesota took over the series after that. And that it was a big win for Minnesota because they were actually 0-2 going into that one. Who they played. Florida, I think, right? Didn't Florida beat them? Yeah, Florida beat them. And who else beat them?
Don't know. I need to look at it.
Oh no, never mind. They were 1-0 going into that match, or 0-1 going into that match, and then they won against Paris to go to 1-1, and then they played a match later in the weekend. So yeah, it was a big win regardless because they had, they didn't have a win yet in the stage. It was a bounce back victory for them.
Saturday we had 3 matches: London versus Atlanta, LAG versus Dallas, and Seattle versus New York. Seattle, New York, pretty much one-sided. New York wins 3-0, but the other 2 matches were 5-game series. Atlanta pulls out a 3-2 win over London, and Dallas squeaks out a win against my boys, LAG. So what do you think about either of these 2 matches?
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway from that London series is maybe because this is coming off of London. London beat New York earlier in the week, and New York had just beaten FaZe. So you think it from that angle, London might have a chance to beat Atlanta, but Atlanta shows up and they win 2 searches, which obviously we were just talking about it. And now that I'm thinking about it, the R-Series interview might have been after this series instead of the first one. But regardless of that, you see them come out and they win both searches in a series that they had to win both searches. So I guess that means they went 3-1 in search this weekend, which is a good sign for them. But yeah, I mean, the other takeaway was that London, they won the first hardpoint on Apocalypse, which it seems like FaZe is trying. I don't remember the exact vetoes, but maybe FaZe. I feel like FaZe has been playing that map a lot. They might be trying it out or adding it, or maybe opponents are just picking it because they don't think FaZe is good at it, regardless of what happened, or regardless of how it works out. I feel like I've just been seeing FaZe play a lot of Apocalypse recently. God, I can't talk. So that's just something to look at moving forward. And London did take the control 3-2. I think it was kind of like a chaotic control, if I remember correctly. I think London was on offense in overtime, and they won. I know I wrote down that they won 2 offenses on Garrison Control, which is almost unheard of. It's a very defensively favored map, even after the change where you can kind of capture a control from green plat. But either way, I think the bigger takeaway from this series is one, it looks like London is competing. They beat New York and they're pushing Atlanta to the brink in Game 5. So London might be better than some people are giving them credit for, which I think is good for them and good for the competitiveness of the league overall. But second point is just that FaZe is continuing to improve in search, and they had to play 2 searches to win this series, and they win them both. So definitely one I'm going to keep my eye on moving forward with FaZe.
As far as the Dallas LAG series, I guess I'll just say that my boys, they did a good job. They put up a good fight. They lost the first hard point by 19 points, come back, win 2 maps, lose game 4 hard point, and then they lose that final game 5, but Fellow just absolutely took over in that map. So it's really hard to he went 12-5. Nobody else in the entire lobby had more than 6 kills, so he was doing it all. And I mean, at that point, it's really difficult to say anything but all right, we were close. We should have won the first hard point. When you're within 19 points, and Assault, bless his heart, 33 kills, but App, Benzi's boy, 16 kills. It's really hard in that respect to win. I mean, he was just. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it is what it is, I guess.
No, I mean, that was the only thing I was going to say is they made a good comeback in that first map 1. I don't remember the exact score, But I remember like I was watching it and like Dallas was up a lot, and then like I might have went to the bathroom or something. I came back and like it was super close coming down to the wire, and I was like, oh damn. So they made it competitive, and we gotta remember, right? It's still like all jokes aside with LAG and like you picking them to go 2-0, whatever. Like it's still a fresh roster, and they just brought in Money Sheen. Like it might not seem like that, but I mean that's the reality. Like they just brought him in. They've played 3 matches with him now. So still not a lot of time with this roster, not a lot of practice, but they've shown flashes of what they're capable of. And who knows, maybe you'll predict them to win the Stage 3 major, but it looks like it looks like even though they weren't able to win this one here, we saw some flashes of what they're capable of, and Dallas is a new team too, but they still are one of those top teams. So LAG fans like yourself had to be at least somewhat happy with this performance, and not like they went out there and got 3-0 smoked.
Yeah, and Chino had a really good first search. He dropped 13 kills, and they swept Dallas on raid control. So I mean, they just completely demolished them in terms of slaying. Crimsix went 7-16, so it was like none of them finished with even a 1 KD. So I mean, there are things to look out and think positively if you're a LAG fan like myself. So Seattle and New York, any thoughts there?
I don't even really remember that series, to be honest.
Well, it was over before you knew it, probably.
It was a stomp. I do remember Hydra notably did not play particularly well. He dropped the 0.7, but obviously it didn't matter in the end. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's just, we don't know how long Seattle was planning on making a change or anything like that, right? But that might have just been the final nail in the coffin, and might have pushed them to make the move that we had already talked about with Decimate coming in for Looney.
Final 3 matches of the week: Paris Legion versus the Florida Mutineers, Minnesota versus Toronto, and the HBR Classic, as I called it last week, LAT versus Opta Chicago. Let's start at the top. Paris is winning champs, and they also won this match 3-1. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big win for them. Kind of like we were talking about with Minnesota winning over Paris, ironically. Paris needed this one, right? Because they were, I believe that means they were 0-3 going into this match, because they're now 1-3. So, yeah, it seems like we've touched on it before. I feel like Paris and Florida have played a couple times already this season, and it seems like Paris has their number. I think Florida won in Stage 1 group play, because then I feel like Paris knocked them out of the Stage 1 major. It was either that or vice versa.
It was vice versa. Yeah, Florida knocked them out.
Yeah, you're right. Because they didn't come in last place, and so regardless, I think that might have been Florida's only win over Paris this year. But I feel like we've seen this matchup a couple times, regardless of the roster iterations, and it just seems like Paris has their number. It did happen that Paris was up 5-3 in Map 2, Moscow Search, and Florida ended up coming back to win 6-5. And then in Game 4, Neptune lagged out, and it ended up the score looked more lopsided than it probably would have been if Neptune was in there the whole game. So some unfortunate circumstances regarding this match, but either way, it is an important win for Paris. They're not winless in their group, and it could be another case where right now we have 3 teams in Group A: Minnesota, Florida, and LAG. They're all 1-2, and Paris is 1-3. So some potential tiebreakers could happen depending on what happens in this following week, right? So if Florida goes 0-2 in this upcoming week, and even if Paris wins their matchup, Paris would finish in 5th in the group, and Paris would finish one above Florida if they're the 2 teams that are 1-4. So yeah.
Next matchup: Minnesota, Toronto. Toronto did the get rocked a little bit and then act like they're super hurt, and then they just completely demolish Minnesota. they like doing this. I don't know if it's a thing. If they're kind of just like talking to each other, it's like, okay, let's throw map one. Let's see what they got, and then they come out and they win 3 in a row. What did you think of Toronto? Like, I guess they're extending their winning streak now.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the big takeaway is that right now Toronto's the undisputed best team in the game. Like, it seems like, obviously we might be nitpicking when we say it, but like we saw it most notably on that like Champ Sundays run at the Stage 2 Major where they played Minnesota, Dallas, and then FaZe. They were losing against Minnesota and Dallas at least. They lost that first map, game one, and then they won 3 in a row. Then they went into the series against Dallas. They lost map one, won 3 in a row. So this is the same thing we saw with Toronto's series against Minnesota. The last time they played at the Stage 2 Major, I don't really know how much of a thing it is, like you said, but I guess that's when a team's playing as well as Toronto is. That might be the only thing we're really able to talk about. So, yeah, I mean, it just looks like the question surrounding Toronto is anybody going to be able to take them down? Toronto's last match is against Paris this upcoming week. So you expect Toronto to take care of business there and finish out the group 5-0. But I guess we'll just have to see what happens.
So since they replaced Methods with Insight, I believe that they're 11-4 with him.
They started slow.
Yeah, they lost their first 2 matches with them.
Yeah.
So I mean they've won
They
8
lost
in a
that
row.
search against the Thieves where Insight dropped what was it, 18 kills.
Yeah, that was their first
That
match.
was the first match with Insight. Yeah.
So that first week or the first like weekend that they had him in the starting lineup, they lose 2 matches. Since then, they're 11-2. So, I mean,
So what was the other loss? They lost another one in Stage 2 group play.
Yeah, it was to
they lost in the winners bracket to Atlanta at the major.
Yeah, so they lost to LA Thieves in the first match, and then they lost to FaZe. They got swept by FaZe, and they lost to the Subliners 2 weeks later, and then at the major they lost to FaZe.
So they haven't lost a series since the winners bracket match against Atlanta in the Stage 2 major. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and they played good teams. They played Dallas twice, beat FaZe. So
you played Minnesota twice.
Yep. So yeah, it's done deal. Toronto is the best team at the moment. We'll see if they can keep it up. We're probably going to talk about some potential meta changes or something at the end of the show. Or right now we're about to talk about it. HBR Classic, LAT Optic, the Thieves, despite coming in with a roster that not many of us believed in, was kind of thrown together before the Stage 2 Major. They win 3-1. Optic not having a great time. This is not fun for Optic fans, I'm sure. This is it's only their first loss of the Stage 3 group play, but again, we talked about in the last show, Optic fans expect to win every single match. So especially when you're facing LAT, which is, I guess, it's not a rivalry as in they hate each other, but it is like a brother kind of, you wanna beat them. What do you think of this match?
Yeah, I think where do I want to start? Maybe it's just a week 2 thing, right? Because like this was their only match of week 2 of Stage 3, and they ended up losing to the Thieves. But we saw in Stage 2 they had that 0-2 week in the middle of Stage 2 group play. So like obviously, I don't know how much weight you want to put into that, but like something might be going on just where like based on the scheduling, they might have a hard time practicing. I don't even know. But that's just something interesting. So the last 2 stages they haven't won a match in the second week of group play. I guess that's like, one of those ironic stats that might not mean anything, but it's a stat. So do with it what you want. Back to the series though. Starts off on checkmate hardpoint, and Chicago was 6-0. coming into this series. So they were undefeated on Checkmate Hardpoint. LAT were 6-2 though, so they had a good record, but they had some losses on it. And LAT takes care of business and hand Optic their first loss on the map and mode combination. Then we transition to Express Search, and then this is where you were kind of hinting at a meta shift or whatever. I don't know if it's really meta shift, but regardless, we see Dashy pull out the FFAR, or the FAMAS, whatever you want to call it, Churn's favorite weapon. And we also see Envoy briefly bring out the Milano on this map. He used it more often on the following map, Raid Control. But Dashy went off with the FFAR in this one. I think he dropped, if I'm remembering correctly, I think he dropped 12 and then Scump dropped 11 and he had the ace in the final round. So yeah, I guess, Dashy was kind of showing that the FFAR might be a viable flex weapon, even though, it was one of those guns that was really good at the start of the season. Not the start of the season, at the launch of Cold War, the game. And then it was nerfed heavily before the CDL season actually even started. So we hadn't really seen it used this competitive season at all until Dashy brings it out. So definitely interesting. Maybe that's a sign that Optic was trying to experiment a little bit in this match. I don't really know if that was the case because, like you said, this is Optic wanted to win this match. There's no way they went into it just we're gonna try things out or whatever, blah blah blah. This was a match for potentially first place because Optic would be in first place if they win it because they'd be 3-0 right now. So regardless, that's Optic wins the search, and then LAT takes Raid Control 3-2, and they absolutely dominate Apocalypse Hardpoint 250-117. So the only other thing I was going to bring up is I thought it was interesting that we saw Optic play the Thieves in the preseason kickoff classic or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously that match didn't count. The only other time before this we saw Optic and LA play was at the Stage 1 Major, and Optic beat the Thieves 3-1. In that series, LA only won the search, and Optic won all 3 respawns. But in this rematch in the Stage 3 group play, we see the exact opposite happens, where LA Thieves wins all 3 respawns, and Optic takes the search. So I just thought that was something interesting to bring up about the match, too. But it was a big win for the Thieves before, obviously, regardless of the win, they end up making a switch with Huke that we already talked about. But I think... we kind of touched on, they had the opportunity to go out and get Huke, and even though they got picked up this big win against Optic, that wasn't going to stop them from going to get their guy.
Like you were saying, LA, they lost that match to Optic in the Stage 1 Major. Since then, since that match, Optic is 6-6. They've won 6 of those 12 matches. They've lost 6 of those 12 matches. What do you think of that?
Optic is 6-6?
Yeah, Optic is 6-6 since beating LAT that first time. So they lost that match to the Subliners at the Stage 1 Major, got eliminated, and then they had 2 losses in Stage 2 Major. Then they lost 2 matches at the Stage 2 group play, lost 2 matches at the Stage 2 Major, and now they also have a 1 loss in the Stage 3 group play.
Wow.
So they're a 500 team in the last, I don't know what the dates are on that, but the last 2 months they're a 500 team.
Wow.
Is there a reason for concern there?
I don't know if there's a reason for concern because, like we talked about on the last episode, this team's not going to make a change. If they did, it would be super surprising. So, maybe that is kind of part of the reason when we saw them pulling out these different guns, right? They're trying to see what works. Just 5 minutes ago, I didn't want to say that they were experimenting with stuff like guns in a series, like a group play match, but maybe that actually was the case, and they're trying to see if they can find a recipe for success. Without actually talking to those guys, I don't really know what's going on over there, but that's definitely, I definitely wasn't thinking about them being 6-6 like that. That's interesting.
And they're in danger of going into 5th place. Currently, they're in a tie for 4th, but I'm pretty sure they own the tiebreaker over New York. Obviously, if they do well this final week and then into the Stage 3 Major, they'll hold a top 4 spot. But there's a very real chance that the Subliners could pass them up. The Thieves are 20 points back in the standings, and even the Rocker are only 40 points back. So, a bad performance at the Major for Optic and a good performance for Minnesota could be the difference between Optic being in 4th and 7th.
I mean, we're going to find out right away because I don't know if you're ready to segue into it, but
yeah, let's do it.
The last match on Thursday is Subliners versus Optic, so it's not going to be too long before we find out which team goes ahead of the other in the standings, regardless of how temporary it might be. We're going to see that soon.
Yeah, let's go through these matches. There's 10 matches this week to finish out Stage 3 group play, and this will determine the seeding for the third major of the season. First two matches, LAG versus Minnesota and New York versus Optic. Who do you have in these two?
I'm picking Minnesota. I think I would pick Minnesota regardless, but I have a feeling you're going to pick LAG, so going to go with Minnesota to be different there. And then I'm really torn on this Subliners Optic group, even before we were just having this conversation about Optic, because we saw what New York is capable of with Hydra, and they beat FaZe, but we also see them lose to a team like London. So, London pushes FaZe to Map 5. They beat New York. Is it more of a question of what, is London turning a corner, or is that a sign of weakness with New York? I don't really know. We still haven't seen a lot from this New York team. So I'm going to let you go first for that one. But I'm going to pick Minnesota for Minnesota LAG.
So I'll say LAG because I mean, I have to keep it up. And in their defense and in my defense, they looked good in many of those maps last week. They really could have been up 2-0 over Toronto in that series. They obviously got smoked in Game 3, but that was after an hour and a half break. And in that second match against Empire, Fellow goes off in Game 5. They lose that map. They also lose Game 1 by 19 points after making a comeback. So very, very real possibility that they could have went 2-0 last week had things gone their way. As for this New York Optic match, I'm going to go with Optic because we just talked about this. I don't think that they're bad or that there's I don't want to say that there's not a reason to panic, but I don't think there's anything they can do about it. So you shouldn't panic because there's no reason to do anything. You can't do anything. If you wanted to go out and you get Huke, that was a possibility, I guess, that you could broker a deal with Dallas and bring him in, but the ship has sailed. You can't do that anymore. So what are you going to do? It's Optic. They have 4 of the best players. I know Scump is not AW Scump anymore, but he is a great player for this team. He fits this team.
Oh, yeah.
And he's played well, really well at certain points. He's a clutch player. So there's no person out there that I'm thinking, all right, go get them. Go get Slasher.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out like that. And I really don't know what they can do. So I would say Optic. And New York hasn't looked incredible in any of their matches with Hydra yet. I still think they're figuring things out. So I think this is a match in which Optic can actually take advantage.
Yep. I will pick New York for the sake of being different. But I think I could honestly, I think this is a coin flip series right now. I could see it going either way. Yeah, it's just, to your point, it seems like neither of us seem to know exactly what's going on with Optic. If you didn't even tell me they were 6-6 in the last 2 months, I wouldn't have even noticed that. It just seems like you can't really say growing pains because other rosters have made changes, but maybe they're still just figuring things out with playing with Dashy again, and I don't know. I think that's even a stretch to say because they've been playing with this roster the whole season. So I really don't know without talking to those guys what's going on behind the scenes. but it might just be a case where, like we said, it doesn't seem like there's any change that Optic could make. So they're just going to have to keep playing through it and figure something out. And this series could be that, like I was saying before, it might just be a stage or a second week thing because, we saw Optic last time they played. So stage 2, week 3, they picked up 2 wins when they needed it, I believe. So, or maybe it was 1 win, I don't remember. But they won, and then Minnesota took care of business, and they got the winner's bracket spot. So we could see something similar this week where Optic they have tough matches against New York and Atlanta, but they could come out and show up and, not really saying anybody's saying anything negative, but, they could shut up any doubters if they are out there.
Yeah. It may be a role issue. We saw Chicago have some role issues last season. Obviously, that was a 5-man team with RCDs, and they were trying to figure out, like, who should be running ARs, like, who should be running MP5s and everything. And Dashi has had his fair share of role issues with, I guess, fake Optic last season. So we don't really know. Everybody seems to be cool with each other. There's no rumors of guys getting mad and this team splitting up or anything. So we just have to kind of see how it plays out.
All I'm learning from us just talking about this recently is I kind of want to interview one of the Optic players and figure out what's going on over there.
Yeah.
I think that might be the only way that not even us, but just the community in general figures out what's going on.
Yeah. We'll see. Seattle versus Atlanta and Florida versus Dallas. Those are the next 2 matches of the week. Who do you have in the Surge versus FaZe match?
I think FaZe should be able to take care of business here. Will be interesting, kind of, being a little repetitive by saying this, but, it'll be Decimate's debut. Not the first time we've seen I'm not going to call him a rookie, but, somebody making their debut with a new team against FaZe. We've seen it a couple times, obviously, most recently with Hydra.
Worked out for him.
And, yeah, that's what I mean. So, could somehow be a honeymoon phase for Seattle and they pull off an upset. I don't think it's going to happen. But, kind of like we were saying that Atlanta is working on their search and Desi should be able to help Seattle improve in search.
Yep.
Is that an avenue for them for victory? Potentially. I don't really know. But, again, Seattle's had so many issues in control, like you talked about that, even if they're able to take the search, it's almost like they're gonna be playing a map 4, so they got to play 2 hard points against FaZe, and they got to win at least 1 if they continue to struggle in control. So I think FaZe will take this one.
I agree with you. I don't really see Seattle, they're gonna have to figure out how this team plays with Decimate because he's a different player. He doesn't play the same way that Looney plays, and that probably is a good thing. I don't think that they wanted to replace Looney with a similar player. It's going to be a learning process like Paris. Paris has kind of struggled to adjust with Temp in the lineup, but we'll see. Florida versus Dallas. I'll go first just to get my pick out of the way. I think Dallas is going to win, but I honestly really think Florida has a good shot of winning this series because Dallas has not looked incredible at all within the last month, and with Fellow, I'm not sure if that's a move that's going to have the most success. We'll see, but I think they pull out this win.
Yeah, I'm going with Dallas too. Obviously, like we talked about, a little bit of unfortunate circumstances with Florida's last match there against Paris with Neptune lagging out or whatever, but even regardless of that, they were losing to a team like Paris who were struggling this stage. So leads me to believe that Dallas should be able to take this one as well.
And then we go to the weekend. We got Paris versus Toronto, New York versus the Los Angeles Thieves, and the Los Angeles Guerrillas play the Florida Mutineers. So let's start at the top. Legion Ultra.
Gotta go Ultra. Not picking against them. Can you give me a reason to?
Yeah, I'm gonna go Ultra despite my hat choice tonight. Doesn't make any sense why I should always pick Toronto until they lose. This is pretty much stage 1 phase. We're doing the same thing.
Yep.
New York and LAT. I'm gonna say LAT because I think Huke is. It's not the same as Decimate coming into Seattle. Huke is. I mean, Huke is Huke. That's all. That's really all I have to say, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good match either way, right? We're seeing Huke going up against Clay, the two guys who are now no longer on Dallas. So they've played already this season while Huke was on Dallas, but it'll be interesting to see the debut in this light. So it's technically two new rosters for the teams. So again, I could see it going either way, similar to New York's match against Optic, but I guess I'm going all in on New York this week, and I'll say that they'll take this one as well.
My boys, LAG, they play Florida, who are obviously coming off of, I believe, a loss. I'm having hallucinations. Florida, yeah, they lost to Paris.
They played the Paris, yeah, but we were just talking about them playing because they played Dallas.
So they could be on a losing streak, depending on how that Dallas series goes. Who do you have in the series?
I'm going to go Florida because I know you're picking LAG. I think this should be another close series, but in a different respect, right? Because we're seeing like a lot of these like quote unquote top teams like Optic and New York and the Thieves in New York, like top half teams are going up against each other earlier this week, and now we're seeing like these two teams kind of in a similar place in the standings, right? With LAG in 8th and Florida in 9th, so it should be a close match. Both teams have made changes coming into Stage 3 to try to improve, so we'll still get more time to see how these teams are playing with their new rosters. I love Money Chain, but I'm going with Florida.
I'm obviously going with LAG. No explanation needed there. And the final 3 matches of the week of the stage group play: London versus Seattle, Optic versus FaZe, and Minnesota versus Dallas. Starting at the top, London versus Seattle.
So this one is super interesting because it's going to be our only chance to see London play, right? They're 1-3 right now, so this is their last match, and they're playing on the last day of the week. So this is our first time seeing them play since they beat New York and pushed Atlanta to a map 5. So this should be the game again, similar to what we were just talking about LAG and Florida. Like Seattle and London are, they're right at the bottom 2 of the standings. So this should be a close series in that regard. But this is where we should be able to see, okay, was London's win against New York a fluke? Was them pushing to FaZe to a game 5, was that a fluke? Or is this new London roster like the real deal? Are they turning a corner? I'm going to pick Seattle just because I believe that, I'm not a London believer at this time. So I'm going to go with Seattle, but again, this is another match I could see going either way.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go with London on this one. They looked really good in the past week. I don't really know if New York is for real. At the moment, I don't think that they're completely cohesive or whatever with Hydra in the lineup. I think there's still growing pains there. But that win is still impressive regardless, and they obviously, like you said, pushed FaZe to a game 5, which is always impressive considering how dominant FaZe has been, even with their, I guess you would consider a slump in the past few weeks. It's a relative slump just because they were absolutely demolishing teams. So I'll go with London here. Seattle, this will be their second match of the week, so maybe they'll get through some of the jitters with Decimate, but they also play FaZe in that first match, which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence that they're going to actually figure anything out in that first match and be able to take it into this match against London. Then we have, I don't honestly know why this isn't the last match of the week.
I know why.
Oh, okay. So Optic FaZe, biggest rivalry in COD.
Yeah, no, I think they're just trying to set up Minnesota Dallas because Minnesota's had Dallas's number. So I guess I don't actually know why, but like that's just my thought process. Why they're trying to change things up a little bit. I don't know. You're probably right, though. It should probably be the last match. But either way, it should be a good one. Hopefully, we see Chicago. I know you picked Chicago to beat New York, and I picked Subliners. So either way, Chicago should be coming off a hard match.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, or just a hard fought one, even if they're able to somehow pull off a 3-0. It likely won't be a stomp, in my opinion. So it should be a good match here between Optic and FaZe. Interestingly, again, I don't like being so repetitive, but we've seen, we've been talking about Atlanta working on their search, and in Optic's match last week against the Thieves, the only map they won was the search. So, is that a point where Optic can come in and try to take the searches from Atlanta to win this? I don't really know. That hasn't been Optic's thing in the past. And earlier this year when we were saying it, Atlanta took both. Was that in stage 1?
Yeah, it was
right?
the last match of the first week.
Yeah, and Atlanta won both searches there to beat it. So I could see something similar happening here. I'm going to pick FaZe. I just think FaZe is a better team, and they should be able to take this one, which could be interesting. I'm not sure, obviously, how that would affect the standings, but
have a big effect.
In my scenario, it would, because Optic would lose both matches this week, be 2-3, and then they would definitely be in losers bracket right away. Which I don't know if that's going to happen, but guess we'll see.
Well, there's a chance that the loser of this match ends up in the losers bracket to start, because if FaZe loses their first match of the week and Optic loses theirs, this is definitely going to be one of these teams will go in the loser bracket, because New York and LAT will have it locked up. So it's really interesting. I kind of hope it comes down to that, just for the hype factor. I just don't see it happening. But I'll go with FaZe in this. I went with Optic over New York because I don't know if New York has really figured it out with Hydra. And while FaZe is not as dominant and they're not looking as unstoppable as they did in the first stage and much of the second stage, it's still FaZe. They haven't looked bad in search or anything. They just looked weaker than we expected them to, considering how well they played earlier in the season. So I go with FaZe in this one. And then the last match, Minnesota, Dallas. I'll go first. I think this is Dallas's series. I'm not real sure here. I think it's a really interesting one, and it could have some effects for obviously group play standings or major standings, because Dallas is 2-1, Minnesota 1-2. Kind of depends on how these teams play in their previous match of the week, but I'll go with Dallas on this one.
I'm going with Minnesota. I kind of teased it before this when we were just talking about Optic FaZe, but Minnesota's had Dallas's number this year. They beat them when they had Major Maniac in the lineup, and they beat them with Standy. So obviously they haven't changed since adding Standy, and Dallas has. So maybe Fellow is the answer to beat Minnesota. I'm not really sure, but I'm gonna go with Minnesota for this one. Should be a good match though. A lot of good matches this week.
Yeah, that concludes our CDL predictions for Stage 3 group play. The next time that we talk to you guys, we'll be talking about Stage 3 major. But before we go, let's open up questions. If anybody in the chat has any questions, make sure to ask. And if you're listening to the audio version on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify, and you're like, well, how do I get involved? How do I ask questions? You have to tune in. When we do our live shows, we do them. Next week we'll be doing it on Monday, I'm pretty sure. But most weeks it'll be on Tuesday at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You come in and you ask your question in the Twitch chat at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. And we'll answer most questions. I'm not gonna say any just to make sure, but most questions we'll answer. Any Call of Duty related ones we'll answer. But yeah, if you're listening on the podcast version and you want to get involved and come and watch us live, go to Twitch on Tuesdays next week, Monday at 11:30. But yeah, questions are open. So if any of you guys are in the chat want to ask something or bring up a topic before we head out, please do so.
I got one just because it's something similar to what we did at the end of stage 2 major. Before we get into that, Trem said, "Do we love FFAR meta?" Answer is only yes. That is our weekly contribution from our head Ego Chall Podcast correspondent, Justin Trimmer Limoges. So thank you, Justin.
Also a certified Ego Chall pal from last episode.
Well, only thing I was gonna ask, because I think we did the similar thing, at the end of stage 2. I think maybe Hype might have asked it in chat, but what matchup do you think would be an interesting one to see in the first round of losers bracket? So that would be the 5th place team from A against the 6th place team from B, and vice versa. What matchup, after everything all shakes out, what do you think is a matchup that you would be looking forward to see? Immediately those two teams fighting for their lives.
I mean, looking at it right now, I would say that. I mean, I guess I'll just say LAG because I'm always interested to see what LAG can do. But LAG versus Seattle, considering Seattle tried to pick up Vivid, Seattle is also. We'll only see kind of a limited sample size of what they can do with Decimate in their roster. I'd like to see those two teams battle it out in the first round of loser bracket. But we all know that LAG is going to win these two matches, so they won't be in first round. But just saying.
Yeah. So my thinking is, who does London play Seattle? So if London wins that match, they're 2-3. And then New York is playing the Thieves and Optic. So in a world where New York loses both matches and London wins their match, London could push New York into 5th place, which would mean New York would play against 6th place in A, which would likely be Paris. I don't think that's necessarily the most interesting matchup. It would be cool because Hydra would be playing in his first major against his, French franchise immediately. But I don't know. I guess there's not as many cool storylines. Like last time when we did this, there was a possibility, I remember, where Optic and LA Thieves could have played in the first round of the loser bracket. And we were both like, damn, that would be something.
Yeah. I mean,
didn't work out that way afterwards, but it's cool to just kind of look at these potential matchups before we see what's going to end up happening.
Well, the winners bracket could be very interesting because right now, I mean, I don't know what the tiebreakers are like currently, but Dallas is in 2nd in Group A, and there's a 3-way tie for 2nd, but also 3rd and 4th with New York, Optic, and FaZe. Any of those 3 teams to play Dallas in the first round of winners bracket would be awesome. And if we see, say, Minnesota get the 3rd seed and they play any of those 3 teams, it would also be super interesting. There's also a chance that LAT drop out of first and they end up. I don't think that they can end up in the losers bracket. I mean, maybe.
I don't think so.
Maybe there's a scenario.
Just because those, the Optic FaZe and New York, they're all playing each other.
Yeah.
In some form. So I don't think there's a way that even if LAT goes 3-2, they'd be in losers. So one of those teams is going to end up being 2-3, I think.
Yeah. So, but regardless, there's a chance that we see a combination of LAT, New York, Optic, or FaZe play Empire or Minnesota in the first round, which would be awesome.
I think that the bigger thing there, it becomes that first seed in Group B is super important because not only do you get that that first round bye, but you're just on the other side of Toronto. You don't have to worry about playing them until potentially the winners finals, and if you're in first place in B, that means you're going to play would it be is it the second in A versus the third in B or something like that? I don't remember. Regardless, you're putting yourself in a good spot to make it further in the major if you come in first place in Group B. So this week's matches have a lot of implications, and obviously in less than a week we will be back to talk about what ended up happening once we know.
Yeah, so the top seed in Group A, they play the second seed in Group B and the third seed in Group A. So like they play the winner of that. So yeah, it would really suck if Toronto would play the second seed in Group A and the third seed in Group B. So it could be Dallas and say Optic or Dallas and FaZe in that winners bracket 1 to play Toronto. That's the gauntlet right there. That does not sound fun at all.
Mm-mm.
And a lot of these teams are really close together in the CDL standings for the season. And while there's not a real immediate danger of any of these teams dropping out of the top 8 and not making champs, the seeding is really important because, like we're talking about right now, if you get the second seed at Dallas, they got the second seed last year at champs and they ended up winning. It's an advantage to get that bye. To get, I believe they're probably going to have a similar format where the first and second seed, they get that bye, like a 1-round bye, so they only really need 2 or 3 wins to win the event, and that's a huge advantage for those teams.
Yep. I think, like I was just saying, we can sit here and speculate all we want, but it'll be much easier to give our thoughts next week once everything is finalized. But either way, I think, we've touched on the winners bracket a lot. The losers bracket could be a gauntlet too, obviously, just because, you're fighting for your lives right away. But a lot of these teams are newer rosters. So it's going to be their first major playing with these rosters. So maybe some of the teams thrive more in a tournament setting as opposed to the group play matches. We won't really know till we see, but that's what I'll be looking at, in respect to the lower bracket of the major compared to what we're already expecting the winners bracket to be a gauntlet, losers bracket. This is just going to be a super interesting major, and I'm really excited for it.
Yep, I'm excited too. If there's no questions, then we'll wrap up the show. Make sure to subscribe. It really helps us to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, but the most important thing, also subscribe on YouTube. We upload the video version of this podcast to YouTube every day or every week that we put it up here. But really what we want you to do is go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. It helps boost the podcast in the rankings. Like when you're browsing through the podcasts and you're trying to find something, if you rate us 5 stars, it pops up higher. More people find out about us. We get really rich. We eventually get richer than CEO Jim, and we can all have private jets, and we can be flying to every COD event when COVID's over. And yeah, so we'll be doing that. But you need to subscribe and rate us well before we can get there. So yeah, and also we'll be back next Monday, 11:30 p.m. Eastern. We're obviously doing it. We mostly do this on Tuesday, but we're doing it on Monday next week because the major starts a day before usual. So we want to get it out a few days ahead. So Monday, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The next time that you see me on the Ego Chall Podcast, I will be a college graduate. 5 years in the making. Actually, 23 years in the making. $30,000 in the making. So make sure to congratulate me when you see me on Monday at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, I got nothing else to say. It was a hell of a job wrapping it up. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And as always, remember to send the chow.